Romans 1:18 following through chapter 3 is really the indictment of humanity. Not only the Gentile world, we'll be looking at that tonight, but also the Jewish world too, and the moralist world, and those who believe they're morally good and superior to other people. They don't escape the indictment either. And I think it'll be helpful for us to keep that in mind, that not only is it the Gentile world that he's going to be dealing with tonight, also the moralist, those who feel that they're better than other people. That's chapter 2. We get in chapter 3. The Jews themselves don't escape the judgment of God in these things. Now, as we begin going down through here, I mentioned to you the last time that we met that we live in a Romans 1 world. We're going to proceed slowly and meticulously through the balance of chapter 1. And I want you see that if that was a mirror, you'd say that it's a reflection of our culture. And it's not only our culture. It's happened in the past as well, obviously, because Paul's dealing with it. But you'll see that it becomes, well, you can bring a really fine point to it when you look at our culture in relation to what Paul's saying here. I'm going to deal with some new interpretations that are actually false because they are presuming something that the text is not saying. And they do so with their motivation to try to find something to justify their lifestyle, their choices, and they think they have found something to do that. But in reality, they haven't. And we'll see that. So let's begin with verse 18. Verses 16 and 17, Paul affirms his confidence in the gospel. He points that out, for I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. Pointing out that the gospel message is for both God's chosen people and for the peoples of the world. And then he goes on, for it is in the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, but the righteous man shall live by faith. And there's a lot can be said about that because it's impacted Martin Luther and some other people of the past. I think Augustine. The Romans awakened their understanding that it is not by keeping the law that anyone is justified. It is by faith. Trust in what God Himself has done in our stead. If we think that we're going to be good enough and that we are good enough, we're just dead wrong. Our standard is way too low if we think that be the case. Verse 18, though, it sets the stage for what's coming. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. All right. There's the indictment. The indictment is that God's wrath is being revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and all unrighteousness of people who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. To suppress, you know what it means. It means to push down, to hold down. They want to, in essence, what they're doing is what is true, they ignore it. They shove it down. Now, Paul's going to enter into what is normally called natural revelation or general revelation, depending on how you want to call it. And basically what he's getting ready to do is unfold several things that indict all of humanity. Have you ever been asked this question, or have you ever considered this question? What about the native in Africa who has never heard the gospel message? How is God going to deal with them? They're condemned. You can look at me like, what? No, they are. They're condemned because they are fallen and they are living in rebellion against God. And that may be shocking. Sometimes we Or some interpreters will say, well, God will judge them by the light that they have received. But the problem is, they're still suppressing the truth, even though they have some semblance of a knowledge of the truth. How do I know that? Well, wherever you go in the world, except maybe Harvard University, everywhere else in the world, people are aware that there is more than us. There has to be. They just look around at creation itself. They look around and they see the stars. They see the moon. They see the flowers. They see the fish. They see all of these things, and they realize intuitively there's got to be more. This stuff just doesn't happen. They know that, and they can ascertain a lot by looking at creation itself. You can begin understanding a lot about God that way. You know that one, He's intelligent. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this stuff out. You know He's intelligent. How do I know that? Just look at the complexity of life around you. Look at the complexity of the different systems in your own body. You're going to tell me that just happened to happen? Unguided natural processes that brought that into being? Nobody really believes that. Even evolutionists, they keep telling themselves that, hoping that it's true. But their motives are not scientific at the bottom level. It's moral. And I can talk about that on another occasion. So, you do know that. But the truth is being suppressed. He goes on and begins a descriptive dialogue about what he's talking about there. Because that which is known about God is evident within them. For God has made it evident to them. When you come to the issue of natural revelation or general revelation, it is that what's been created, the heavens declare the glory of God, the psalmist tells us. When you begin noticing those kind of factors, you begin realizing and understanding that, this just didn't just occur. There has to be a cause. And it doesn't take a person too long to figure out that cause has to be much more than us. And I was going to finish a thought that I had a while ago. Even the most primitive people will believe in some sort of God or gods. American Indians, the Native Americans, they believed in the Great Spirit. Where did that come from? Where did the intuition come from that there must be a God or gods out there? Did that evolve too? Well, no, it doesn't really make sense if it evolved. And how would humanity come to think along those lines? Well, God has made it known. He's placed it within us. You see, when you come to natural revelation, as a professor named Jay Budichevsky says, everyone has that knowledge within them of the existence of God. They have a knowledge of right and wrong. And the question for the atheist is, where does that come from? And they can't answer that question. Because an atheist believes that nothing created everything. Or nothing is the source of everything. And which really doesn't cohere very well together. For example, let me give you this one. You can hear in debates between a Christian and or a theist, somebody who believes in God, and an atheist. One of the Achilles heel, if you want to use that terminology, for the atheist is morality. Where does it come from? If there is no God, if atheism is true and there is no God, do you realize there is no right or wrong? Do you realize that? Now, if you argue with an atheist, they will have some kind of morality. I am not suggesting that an atheist cannot be a moral person. My question is, where does that come from? What basis do they have to have any semblance of morality of any sort? there's no answer. They will talk about self-preservation, the preservation of the species, all that kind of stuff. But those responses are inadequate. Where does it come from? How do you know that murder is wrong? How do you know? It's already there. Back to J. Budichevsky. He wrote a book not that long ago, a few years now, called The Things That We Can't Not Know. He's talking about natural revelation. He says you don't need to push it into a person. You need to simply dredge it out. It's already there. In other words, you're just going to bring it back to light. And in one of his examples about that was he was talking about, he was, of course, he's a college professor, so he talks a lot about college students. And he was talking about this one young woman that on campus, she was known to be a person who celebrated her abortion. She gave speeches about it. She led, rallies, she carried the signs, all that kind of thing. She celebrated that. But unbeknownst to most people, at a certain period of time every year, she would sink into a deep depression. She was not even making the connection of anything. And it was Budichevsky's wife that actually dredged up the problem. You should go to counselors, and they would talk about her. They probably would offer medication to help her, that kind of thing. But that's all that's doing is treating a symptom for this young woman. It wasn't treating the cause. So as Budichevsky's wife, who worked at a crisis pregnancy center, was talking to her, she finally began just dredging it up. Why do you think you get depressed? She began, first of all, let me get the story, the sequence a bit better. The first thing she said was, I know that you how proud you are of your abortion, how you celebrate that and all that kind of related stuff. And on campus, you're a very important voice for pro-choice meetings and whatnot. So just let me ask you, why do you think you get depressed at a certain period of time every year? Well, she didn't have really a clue. So they kept on talking about that and whatnot. And finally, Budichevsky's wife, as I remember the story, she asked this question. If you would not have aborted the baby, when would the baby have been born? Her response was, and this I remember a direct quote, about this time of the year. Bingo. You see, the answer was there. She was unaware of it. And what happened is you have to dredge it up. As part of natural revelation or general revelation, God has implanted in us a sense, an understanding, a conscience when it comes to morality. That certain things are wrong. We live in a day in which morality, by many people's standard, is considered simply a matter of opinion. About on the same level, well, you like vanilla ice cream, I like chocolate ice cream, it's just that kind of thing. They want to stay away from the Holocaust because their worldview cannot explain that in terms that are satisfactory. So they kind of steer away from that. But when you begin asking them about certain kind of things, like, well, in some situations, theft can be wrong. Or it can be right. Don't you remember? What's going on in L.A. right now? It's not just the burning of cars by the mostly peaceful protesters. What are they doing to stores? Stealing, aren't they? And that happened in Minnesota. That happens all around with some of these so-called protests. Now, when you deal with that, people say, well, I heard one news commentator say, well, these people are economically disadvantaged, so it's just kind of just leveling the playing field a little bit for them to loot stores. Okay, if you want to say it that way. But if you want to prove to someone that stealing is wrong, Steal something from them. And they'll tell you immediately it's wrong. Even a thief, steal his billfold and watch him protest. Right? So we know that. We know. We have certain kinds of responses that it's already implanted in us. But what do we do with it? What's verse 18 say? We suppress it. That's what that news commentator was doing. Was suppressing the truth. Don't believe your eyes. People going in there and carrying off everything that they can get. Don't believe your eyes. Just listen to us. And what they're doing is suppressing the truth. Everybody knows it. They know it. They're just trying to make it sound acceptable. So he goes on. He talks about that. Verse 20. For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes, His eternal power, His divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so they are without excuse. Remember that shocking statement I said a few moments ago about the person living in Africa who's never heard the gospel? What's going to happen? They have no excuse. They stand condemned. Oh, by the way, I need to back up and deal with a word that I kind of overlooked that is very germane to everything we're saying here. What would that be? Wrath. Wrath. What is that? The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. So what is the wrath of God like? Is it like a volcano? Explosive. Is it like the flood? Is that what it's like? Is it like God sending His people into exile because of their consistent disobedience? Is that what we're talking about? Well, those may be certain expressions of God's wrath, but there's a particular kind of God, a meaning here of God's wrath that is so often misunderstood and overlooked. And it's this. The fancy way of saying it is, it's God's settled attitude or indignation toward human sin. It's not explosive. It's not God sending a tidal wave or a tsunami to wipe people out. It's not that. It's worse. It's worse. No, it's not the flood destroying all the. No, it's in one sense it's worse. It's more frightening. And we're going to get to it in a moment because 3 times he's going to say something. And I'm going to point it to you when I get there. 3 times Paul emphasizes something that is absolutely horrifying. And the horrifying nature of what I'm going to show you in a few moments is missed by the majority of people, even people who are familiar with the Bible. They do not see the horrendous nature of this expression of God's wrath. So we'll go on a little bit more. Back to verse 20. In the creation of the world, His invisible attributes. I mentioned some of those a moment ago. God's powerful. Why would I say He's powerful? Because if you look at creation itself, and the more we learn about creation itself, the more we are impressed with how technical and how delicate and how precise so many things are. Do you realize if the earth was tilted just a few degrees either way, you and I wouldn't be here? You know that? Do you know if our planet's orbit was just a little bit closer to the sun or a little bit further away, we wouldn't be here? We live in what some scholars have called the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. I forgot the number, but a couple of scholars wrote a book a number of years ago called The Privileged Planet. And in that book, they cite all of the specific settings were necessary for this planet to have life on it. We can go even further. Do you know if our sun was bigger or smaller, we wouldn't be here? It's just the right size. Do you realize that I know you know this. Do you realize that the solar system that our planet is in is just in the right size, with the right planets. We need Jupiter. Jupiter kind of sucks up all the asteroids coming through. We need Jupiter because of the gravitational pull. We need the moon. We literally need the moon. Because if we didn't have the moon, we wouldn't be here. Because it controls tides. It controls, as a matter of fact, have you ever heard of a lunatic? That's somebody who's moonstruck. It was the idea that that the moon somehow affects things. I don't know this to be a fact. I just know it more just kind of anecdotally. But I have talked to people in emergency rooms, doctors, nurses. Not every one of them. I just say, hey, when the moon's full, what's it like?
Crazy.
Crazy. Police officers will tell you the same thing. So there's that interaction there. Well, whatever. We can go on and on with this. We know that he's intelligent. We know he's powerful. We also know he's intelligent. He has to be intelligent. We know he's intelligent because of, again, the complexities of creation. We know he's all-powerful, or we know he's at least powerful to do all this. We also know some other things about him, if we would stop and think about it. We also know that he's a person, a being, a person. Why would I say that? Well, a force can't choose. Only a person can choose. So, God chose to create. Okay? Make sense? I hope so, because he did. But go on with this. He goes on to say for that his invisible attributes, his divine nature, have been clearly understood by what he has made. So they are without excuse. Every single human being is without excuse. Because not that they know anything about God personally, but they know God must exist. You know this. I've used this example before. I'm standing up here, and I'm talking to you all, and suddenly a red ball comes whirling toward me, and I dodge it. It hits the wall behind me. What are you guys going to do? Why would you do that? Couldn't it have just appeared? No, you know that there must be a cause of an action. That's why you intuitively look. Where did it come from? So you can even apply that to creation itself. Where did it come from? I mean, nothing made everything. Or I should say, nothing led to the formation of everything. You know that can't be. In order for something to take place, there has to be a cause. The Greek philosophers call that the first cause. So when someone, even as bright as Richard Dawkins says, well, where did God come from? Is a stupid question. Why is it a stupid question? Because if God came from somewhere, he's not God. You see. You're thinking in the wrong categories. He can't be a part of creation. He has to be outside of it in order to cause it. Well, we'll go on by that. Even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations. And here we go. And their foolish heart was darkened. You suppress the truth long enough, you will no longer be able to recognize the truth. You just can't do it. If you suppress the truth long enough, you will get to the place where you can no longer recognize what is true. Professing to be wise, they became fools. Great contrast. Professing to be wise, they have become fools. And they've exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man, and of birds, and of four-footed animals, and crawling creatures. Now he's talking about idolatry. What have we done? Well, what humanity has done is, in just kind of general statement, is what we've done is we want to create a god or gods in our image. Because that way we're comfortable. And you'll find this over and over in the cults and in other places as well with other people where they do that very thing. They create God. The Greeks did it. And the Greeks were very intelligent, at least some of them were very intelligent in the people, but they created gods in their own image. That's why you read, Greek, the myths of the Greeks and later the Romans. You have these gods that they worshipped, very much like us. Very much like us. Flawed, untrustworthy. You had to be suspicious of them. You had to make sure that you kept on the good side, or otherwise they'll get you. And whatnot. A little bit further. And then here we go in verse 24. Therefore, remember the rule of interpretation? When you come to a therefore, look to see what it's there for. It's going to give some application. Why? Because their foolish hearts are darkened. They thought themselves to be wise, but they've actually become foolish. They've become fools. Therefore, God gave them over. I don't know if you mark in your Bibles or not. If you do, mark that. This is the expression of God's wrath in its most frightening form. God gave them over in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, so that their bodies would be dishonored among them. Okay? There's the first use of God gave them over. You may have a translation that says God gave them up. Means the same thing. God comes to the place where He just says, okay, this is what you want to do? This is what you want to believe? Is this what you want to practice? Is this how you wish to live? Go to it. Go to it. No thunder, no lightning bolts from heaven. No earthquakes to get their attention. Just, if that's what you want, go to it. Verse 25, another very important word. For they, here it is, exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and they worship and serve the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. You see the trade-off? Here's what you got going on. You've got humanity suppressing the truth. They know the truth, they're aware of the truth, but they don't want to acknowledge it, so they suppress it. Suppress it long enough, you're no longer going to recognize it, or be thinking of it, or conscious of it. Doesn't mean it's not there, it just means you suppress it to the point. Then you have the freedom. It's not God that you have to worry about anymore. Now you can call your own shots. You can do your own thing. Now since you've got that done, God says, okay. All right. So God gave them over to the lusts of their flesh, to do whatever they wanted to do. But here's the thing. This is the way we work as humans. We think that we start here and we go up. That's not what happens. We get better and better and better. Aren't we smarter than people in the past? Now, you heard me before saying, no, we're not. As a matter of fact, in some senses, I don't think we're as intelligent. We just have more of accumulation of knowledge and an accumulation of technology. As far as intelligence, But what really happens is we don't go up. Like evolutionary theory, we get more and more complex. We don't do that. What happens is we go down. That's where we go. The whole time we're going down, we think we're going up. that we are going up when in essence we're sinking deeper and deeper in depravity. We think we're getting better and better and better. If you believe that, I don't remember all the details, but I had in junior college I had a class on Psychology 101, and I remember the professor. He was one of the professors I really liked. I don't know why I did. I just liked his presentation, liked his lectures, and we were studying the behavioralists, B.F. Skinner, those folks that believed that they take, and as I remember it, I may be wrong here, but as I remember it, they kind of in the background they had the theory of biological evolution, that we're getting better, more complex. That kind of moving up and whatnot, and they apply that to our behavior and our understandings and that kind of thing. So behavioralists believed that we were getting better and better and better and better. And you know what happened? World War I. World War I. Now we have a world at war. That kind of rained on the parade of the behavioralists that we're getting better and better. Well, they kind of shook that one off, but guess what happened? World War II. And then all the ugliness that came out of World War II, the rise of the Third Reich, and all that took place there, and the Holocaust, and et cetera, et cetera. How could that happen? But if you think about it and begin, not a lot has changed, has it? Not a lot has changed. Just look at the contemporary scene in our world right now. Do you see it? Do you see what's going on? Okay. It's pretty. Someone said that when in all the doctrines, the doctrine of human depravity is the one that's easily verified. Yeah. Because you don't have to look, you just know it's true. You know it's true. Go on. God gave them over, and they exchanged the truth for a lie. It's not a very good trade, is it? But if you're a fallen human being, it makes good sense. We don't want the truth. We want the lie. We're comfortable with the lie. Because of that, we move into verse 26. And this is where I'm going to spend a little bit of time. And not here, I know, but if we were if I was saying these kind of things in other contexts, I would have people really, really mad in a moment. They'd be really mad because the lie is much easier to embrace than the truth. Okay? So what is it? Verse 26. For this reason, God gave them over to degrading passions. Now, literally it says, for their females exchanged the natural function for that which is unnatural. Okay. If you have a New King James Version, you have the literal translation of this word. Chrysis. It means use. So what it literally says is this. For this reason God gave them over to degrading passions, for even their females exchanged natural use for that which is unnatural. A few things about this, and we'll get into it, and I'm going to talk about some of the aberrant and false interpretations of this passage. So to kind of ease into it, I want to say something general. Generally speaking, in a culture that is descending downward into depravity, the last group to be affected is women. And kind of tongue-in-cheek, or maybe a little bit of a smile, I want you to understand something about women. Women civilize men. Seriously. Take a 22-year-old man hanging around with 22-year-old men. You're looking for something to happen. Sometimes the collective intelligence in a group goes down, not up. But let that 22-year-old man find a young woman that he fancies, and he marries her. Normally, there are exceptions, but normally, he will become less apt to run with the boys, and he'll pay more attention to what's at home. And she will be able to influence him in ways that those young men never, ever could. In one sense, there's a civilizing factor there that a woman brings into a relationship, especially marriage. Okay? Because she sets the tone for the home. And we could do all kinds of sociological things there. I just think that should pretty much stand on its own. What happens when the female population is also depraved? What happens to a culture when that is the case? Paul leads off with this in this particular section. Now, he's not talking about when he's talking about the natural use. My translation, the New American Standard, uses the word natural function. Now, these two words, whether it's translated function or use, is incredibly important to understand what Paul's talking about. Okay? He's talking about lesbianism. No question. And we're going to switch now to men. He follows up with verse 27. And in the same way, you got it? In the same way, also the males, literally the males, abandon the natural function or the natural use of a woman or of a female, and they burn in their desire toward one another, men with men committing indecent acts and receiving in their own persons the due penalty for their error. Okay. A lot to unpack there. Now, if you have an NIV, or even a English Standard Version, or you have the new, the latest edition of the New American Standard Version, it will say something to the effect that they're involving in that which is not natural or against nature. Depending on what translation you're doing, they get that kind of idea. Now, what that has done, that particular translation, is not wrong, but it's not totally right either. Because what it's done is for some, it has left the door cracked just a little. So there will be those with gay-affirming theology that will come along and say, well, the Bible never says anything about consensual same-sex relationships, loving, committed relationships. Doesn't say anything about that. And they point out, and this is what they'll say. They'll say something to the effect that what is, they'll capitalize on the word natural. And say, it is not natural for a gay man to desire a woman. He will desire another man. Or it's not natural for a lesbian to desire a man. She will desire another woman. Now, the problem with that interpretation is it totally leaves out the word krisis. It means function. It means use. It's talking about, well, do it this way. If I just walked into Walmart and there's an old boy sitting there on the bench there, he's sitting there waiting for his wife or somebody to come out. He's just sitting there looking for somebody to talk to. I sat down by him and I say to the old boy, "Tell me the purpose of sex." He's going to tell me that quick. He is. He's going to tell me that quick the purpose of it. Now I want to go to a different scene. If I go down to Carbondale, I go down to the university, and I walk in, and there's a couple professors there, and I sit down with them, and I ask them the same question. They're not going to be able to answer me. They're not going to be able to tell me the answer. They don't know the answer. Oh yeah, they do. They just don't want to admit they know the answer. It's for the propagation of the species. It's for the next generation. We know that. Yeah, I know it's the one flesh union. I know the importance of that. But primarily it is for the purpose of bringing the next generation into the world. The guy at Walmart, he knows that. He can tell me that quick. The professors, they've been so educated, they're educated beyond their intelligence, and they really can't give me the answer. Okay, fundamental. Now, why I'm saying this is, that's what he's talking about. He's not talking about, well, you have these feelings, or those feelings, or you have this proclivity, or that proclivity. He's not talking about that stuff. He's not talking about the temples, where temple prostitution was going on. Yes, in Corinth, it was wicked. They had sacred prostitutes, both male and female. They had males that looked like females and vice versa. They had all that kind of stuff. Nothing's new under the sun, really. But he's not talking about the temples. He's speaking more generally about the culture. So, anytime somebody comes along with gay affirming theology and tells you that Paul is not talking about just the things that he's talking about what takes place in the temples. The thing you need to say to them is, wait a minute, how come he doesn't say that? Yeah, he talks about idolatry beforehand, but he's not talking about the temples. Well, what he was talking about is men that take advantage of boys. Did that take place in the ancient world? Oh yeah, sure did. Sure did. That's not what he's talking about. Just read what it's saying. And hopefully we have enough wherewithal to understand what is being said. What is going on? Well, what's happening is the thing that humanity loves to do. We love to take creation order. We love to take what God has designed and we want to twist it to fit us. It's the same kind of thing that was in the garden. Along comes a snake, speaking to Eve. Has God said? Did he really say that? Or is there wobble room here? And then she said, because see, here's what you don't know, Eve. That when you eat that fruit, you'll become like God, knowing good and evil. Now that's a half-truth. They're going to learn what good and evil is, but they're not going to be more like God. They have already been created in the image of God. Matter of fact, they're going to be less like God once they eat of it. So what do we take in creative order? What we've taken in creative order, in creation order, is we've taken it and we've perverted it. We've twisted it. All the stuff that is celebrated today and embraced today, of course it is Pride Month, right? What all that's going on, what it has done is it's taken God's created order, what God has said is good, and we've twisted it as humanity. We have twisted it into something that God never intended it to be. Paul's words are strong here. The indictment is real. But see, the thing of it is, and remember the phrase I asked you to check for, in verse 26, God gave them over to degrading passions. This is unnatural. It's not normal. It's not according to God's standards. Now, someone may have conflicting kinds of feelings, attractions. I'm not debating that those don't exist. In a fallen world, we're all messed up. Okay? We're all messed up. We all have our issues. We all have our proclivities towards certain kinds of sin. Because we're broken, we're fallen, And that's what we have to live with. Our desire is to live without sin, to live in a way that brings honor to Him now as well as in the future when the consummation of everything happens. But until then, we're going to struggle. We're going to have trouble. You know, if some young man comes to me or to you and says that he has feelings toward other males, I'm not stunned by that. I'm not overwhelmed by that. I'm not frightened by that. I just realize, yeah, sure you do. And I can say, well, I have also proclivities, feelings toward females. But you need to build a guardrail about that. That's why God created marriage. In the beginning, God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. Later, He says, after Adam, maybe it's Adam still talking. And she's, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she's taken from the man. For this reason, a man will leave his father and his mother and be united to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. That's the foundation. It's God's design. It doesn't say, and we can debate polygamy another time, but the kings of Israel that practiced polygamy were never sanctioned by God. Never was. Abraham's, his 2 wives were never sanctioned. Jacob's 4 wives were never sanctioned by God. It's part of the fallen human condition. 1 man, 1 woman for life. That was God's design. Because it works. Because it works. Because it works. And then he goes on after that, and he says in verse 28, and just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, that sound like today? God, here it is again, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do those things which are not proper. Now he's going to give us a list in just a moment. So now what humanity has done, what our culture has done, is we now are celebrating the very thing that is the antithesis of what God created humanity to experience. And we've taken what was good and we've called it bad, and taken what is bad and now we have elevated it to being a supreme good. That's our culture. Why is our culture like that? It's because God, listen to me, God has turned us over as a culture. And when you listen to people give defenses for relationships that are not sanctioned in the Bible, and they seek to do all that kind of evil, what you need to understand is their minds have been darkened because of suppressing the truth in unrighteousness. Okay? Further, he goes on and talks about what this depraved mind to do those things which are not proper. Like what, Paul? Can you give us some examples? Well, yeah, he can. Being filled with all unrighteousness. Big term. Not righteousness, but unrighteousness. Not rightness with God and with others, but unrighteousness. The opposite of that. Wicked. Greed. Evil. Full of envy. Murder. Strife. Deceit. Malice. Gossips. Oh man. Even when you come, most of those things we want to steer clear of in church, but not that last one. Gossip. You got to be real careful about prayer chains because they can become gossip chains. I've had people even ask me, "Tell me more details so I know how to pray." I usually respond, "Well, God knows what the details are. You just pray." Why do they want to know more details? I heard one preacher say it this way. It's because the favorite song of so many within church is I love to tell the story. That's their favorite hymn. Slanderers. haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful. I'm going to back up. Let's just stay with arrogant for a moment. What's this month called?
Pride.
Oh, Pride Month. Years ago, when I was living in southeast Arkansas, I received a video in the mail. You know, VCR kind of video back in those ancient days. Some of you know what those are. And what it was an unedited Pride March. Didn't keep it that long. I never made it all the way through it. A friend of mine, he was a pastor in a neighboring town. He took a hammer to it. He didn't realize it was sent to us to let us know what actually. See, what you see on television normally is not a real pride. It's not really what you're seeing. It's the edited version. They only show you certain kind of things. It is absolutely. It's beyond. If everybody saw one of those, an actual march, there would be uproars. Uproar. And not to get too fine a point on it, but I got a question. Why do drag queens want to read stories to children?
Convert.
It's called grooming. It's exactly what they're doing. You know, if they want to do those shows for adults, whatever. But why is it children? Yeah. Just curious. Slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient. It made it. Disobedient to parents. Without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful, although they know the ordinance of God. Now here's back to the unsuppressed truth. Even though they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death. Is this serious stuff? Before God, it's very serious. They not only do the same, but give hearty approval to those who practice them. Stunning. Stunning. That's our culture. That's why we have Pride Month. That's why certain segments of our governmental officials, they just love this stuff. They want to funnel money to all this kind of thing. And they want to do so knowing that deep down that it's wrong. But at the same time, not only do they practice this stuff themselves, they give hearty approval for those who practice them. 3 times. Most terrifying words in Scripture. God turned them over. Doesn't send lightning bolts. Doesn't send tragedies. He just says, go to it. The thing about it, and I'll quit with this. When you look at what God, we're still fallen human beings, so marriage suffers. There's all kinds of problems that can happen. You get 2 imperfect people together, and guess what you have? You have 2 imperfect people coming together. That's what you have. And it's not always easy. It's not always easy. I'm going to tell you this one, then we'll quit because it's almost time to quit anyway. I've got I don't call it premarital counseling anymore. I just call it premarital sessions because I'm not counseling. They're not listening, and I'm not going to talk them out of it. It's too late, Though I can tell you some colorful stories about some of that. But I have this thing I give them. I read it to them. It's about the differences between a man and a woman. And this is the way it goes, and we'll give you the condensed version. A couple has been dating for 6 months. And they went to a movie together, had dinner, they went to a movie together, and they're on their way home. He's on his way to take her to her house. And as they're on their way, she says, of course, she's got to talk. She's a woman, okay? So she says to him, do you realize that we have been dating for 6 months? And she immediately thinks, I should have said that. He's going to think that I'm going to be pressuring him for us to go to the next level in relationship, maybe to him to propose, and she's just worrying all over about, how's she going to undo that? And he doesn't say a word. He's just staring down the road, driving. He doesn't respond with yes or no or really or nothing. He did nothing. He just listens. So she tries to undo that and begin to talk about something else. And the whole time she's worrying about what is he thinking. And you know what he's thinking? 6 months, huh? It's been 6 months since I changed the oil on this car. So you have differences, okay? But if you really want to see brokenness, just move away from God's design, creation order, to this artificial thing that people have constructed, and you'll see real brokenness. With that happy thought, I'll let you go.
Thank you.